Tonight we have two short stories, all wrapped up in one week of great Bible reading. So, we're going to look at both of those, and I'll also tell you, so that's going to be a little bit different tonight, how we're going to look at these stories. I'll also tell you tonight, and some of you know this, that the Indians are in Game 7 of the World Series right now. And so, being from Northeast Ohio, I'll be leaving right after the Bible study. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. I won't be sticking around for questions. What's that? My earphone fall. Yeah, that's right. So I hope that you have discovered so far in the study of Genesis, that the Old Testament is anything but boring. Now, I'm a priest, so people talk to me about Bible. Probably because they don't know what else to say to a priest, but they talk to me about Bible. And so sometimes I'll hear folks say, "Oh, I never read the Old Testament. I only read the New Testament." And they'll give me reasons. They'll say, the Old Testament is it's not interesting. The Old Testament, there's nothing meaningful in the Old Testament. Or they'll say, that Old Testament's so confusing, it just seems nonsensical. So I never touch it, I just stick to the New Testament. But I hope that you're finding in this Bible study that the Old Testament is filled with some really great stories. Now, some of them are very meaningful. Some of them are powerful. Some of them are fascinating. Some are twisted, and some are wacky. Tonight we're going to discuss two short stories. And we're going to begin tonight with the less familiar and perhaps to you more surprising, a story that you will not be surprised to know does not show up in the Revised Common Lectionary on Sunday morning. It's the story of Tamar and Judah. So here's the thing about this. I created some visual aids. They're not good, but they will help us trace this wacky story. So, you can see some of my bad drawings. All right, so this is Genesis chapter 38. Genesis chapter 38. So, we've talked a lot about, in Genesis, origin stories. Right? That's what we've talked about a lot. Origin stories. So, I'm going to say that Genesis chapter 38 might be the origin of modern soap operas. I mean, it has it all, right? Sex and death, deception, mistaken identity, and a great twist at the end. It's like a soap opera. So let's start it here. We have this chapter 38. We read 37 through 45 for tonight. And most all of it's about Joseph, except chapter 38, is this strange interruption in the story. And it's a story of Judah and Tamar. So, it's almost as if the story begins and then it says, meanwhile, back in Canaan, and we jump to the story about Judah and his family. So we begin by finding out that Judah, he leaves his family and his brothers. Text doesn't tell us why. Maybe he had too many sheep. Maybe they couldn't all stay in the same pen. Maybe he was mad at his brothers. But for some reason, Judah leaves home. And he leaves home, and the text tells us he gets married. That's supposed to be an engagement ring. I don't know what it looks like. A weird number 8. I don't know. I only had green, brown, and black. Like, what are you going to do? So he gets married. And so he gets married to a nice Canaanite woman. And as we're going to find out, we're going to see this also in the Joseph story. At the time when these stories in Genesis were written, the fact that he married somebody outside the family was not a big deal, right? So he marries a Canaanite woman. There's no judgment in the text, just like when Joseph marries an Egyptian woman at the end of Genesis. There's no judgment. It's just stated plainly. And so he marries a Canaanite woman, and they have 3 baby boys. See that? Look at that. 3 baby boys. I know they're a little small. They actually have eyes and everything. There's three baby boys. And as is the case in this ancient society, the boys and Tamar, they don't really have a say in who they're married. So the text just jumps us into saying this is happening. Tamar and they're happening. So Tamar marries They get married. This is Tamar. I gave her these eyes. Green eyes with like little eyelashes. So you would be able to tell that she was the wife. And so they get married. But here's the bad news. Turns out he's evil. Right? Bad for her. She didn't have a choice in that. She gets the evil guy. So, and then we're going to just sort of breeze through this shocking statement, but, we'll acknowledge that it happens. So then the Bible says, well, was especially evil, and so God kills him. So we're going to just blow past that, the fact that God just kills because he's evil. But that's what happens, according to the text. So then Tamar, she doesn't have a husband and she didn't have any children because God killed the husband who was evil. And she ends up marrying second baby boy, Onan. So basically what this happens is it was a custom in some ancient societies that if a woman married to the oldest son and then that son died and it was without children, then the next son in the family who was unmarried would then be asked to marry her. And what would happen is the expectation was they'd have children, but those children would be considered the children of his brother for inheritance purposes and whatnot. So what the idea was that Onan was forced to marry Tamar, and then the idea was there that he would have children with Tamar, but they would be considered children, not his children, even though they were his children. Right? So it's a little bit different system than we usually have today. So Onan, he has a problem with this. He doesn't like that system. So he's ahead of his time, I suppose. So the thing about Onan, and I recognize very much that I'm talking to a crowd of my parishioners and church people, but here's the reality of the text. Onan, he is okay with having sex with Tamar, but he is not okay with the baby part of it. So he pulls out, and this is Bible, folks. So I don't know what to tell you. I was talking to Father Brendan about this earlier. He was glad this was not the week he's leading. But this is what happens, and it's a primitive birth control, and he does it. And, well, God doesn't like that either, so God kills Onan. So you're down 2. We're going to go right through that too. At this point, Shelah, the third son, is nervous. Clearly, this is not going well for the family. So he's nervous. He's the last one. And Judah says, well, when he gets a little older, you can marry him too. Third time's the charm. So, but this is where the plot thickens. Because
sounds like a game
show. It is kind of like a game show, isn't it? We're going to see how Shelah does. He hopefully well. So Judah says, well, you'll promise my third son, but then also secretly Judah's thinking, there's no way I'm risking my son on this woman. We're 0 for 2 right now. Both of the men who have married her are dead. I don't want all of my sons to die because of Tamar. So that's what she decides. Well, this is bad news for Tamar. Because Tamar is then recognizes what's happening. That's her only shot. So now she's a desperate woman. Because if she was widowed and had no children, she would be destined for a life of severe poverty. She'd have no inheritance, no boys to take care of her. No husband, no son. And so, there's tears, and that's right. I should have drew them on the map. So, she hatches a plan. This has 2 pages to this. And better drawings, by the way. Which folks on Facebook see, that's the good stuff. So she has a plan. She knows some things, right? And before we get into her plan, we have to say this. Once again in Genesis, you will need to suspend your own sense of morals, right? the moral judgments of Genesis are different than the morality we might have today. So we know that part of the plan is that she's going to pretend to be a prostitute. And the Bible has no judgment. Tamar's the hero of this story. So the Bible, it doesn't say, and it was really bad, she did it, but sex outside of marriage. No, so the Genesis is not making a moral judgment on that. She's the hero of the story. Genesis does recognize that she has very few options. And so this is what she chooses to try to preserve her life, right? So we have to sort of suspend our own moral code here and recognize that the Bible is suggesting that Tamar had very few options, very few things to sort of save her life and her line, her family line. This is what she could do. And so the Bible is okay with it in Genesis. The author of Genesis is okay with this. Well, here's what Tamar knows. She knows that her only option right now is that she's going to live in poverty. She knows that Judah is not willing to risk son number 3. He's 0 for 2. He's not taking a chance on number 3. She knows both of these things. Now, she also knows Judah because that is her father-in-law. And so she knows a little bit about his life. She knows the route that he takes. She knows that Judah likes sex, and he is okay with prostitutes. She knows both of those things, right? She knows it's very unlikely that Judah is going to be walking around carrying a goat, which makes sense. That's weird luggage, and goats probably wiggle a lot, so you don't want that. So she knows Judah is not going to be carrying a goat, which gives you a clue of why she negotiated her price as a goat, right? Because he didn't have it with him. That was important. And so she also knows that she needs something valuable to him, something that would also be significant and unmistakably his to make this plan work. This is what she knows. And so you know how this goes in the story. She tricks him. He thinks she's a prostitute. They have sex. She gets pregnant. He says, what's your price? She says a goat. This is also different than probably today. And then she says, well, since you did not bring a goat with you, and I want a goat, you need to give me some identifiers, some things that I know that are yours, and so when you bring me the goat, I'll trade you back. Meanwhile, then she changes out of the prostitute's clothing, back into her mourning garb for the death of her second husband, I assume, and they can't find her. And nobody in the town knows who she is because she's not normally a prostitute. She's doing this to get pregnant so that she can have a son and so that she can be protected. Right? So, at 3 months after, the text tells us, she starts to show. People start to recognize, hey, Tamar's pregnant and she's not with a man. What's going on here? And so they decide in the text, you'll see, well, she's been playing the whore. That's the wording that some of the translations use. Well, so Judah says, well, we can't have that. Let's burn her. Right? You read the text. He says, that's our plan. She did this. She shouldn't have. I guess we'll burn her. 3 months pregnant. Not exactly a generous response. But right before that happens, she brings out all the goods and says, well, the person who belongs to these is the father. And then Judah realizes what happens, and he's shocked. That's a shocked face. He's like, what? And this is kind of a nice twist to the story. This is where it starts to twist, right? And then he basically realizes, well, that was actually a really good plan. I can live with that. That was clever. So rather than being upset about it, he feels like, well, that was a good trick. So I will raise your child. And we find out once again, this is a very Genesis way to end this story. Tamar is pregnant with twins, which may be why she was showing so obviously at 3 months, I guess. And we see once again twins run in the family. We just had that. And baby number 2, Perez, is once again, the second-born is once again the one through whom the blessing comes. Because, our text doesn't tell us this, but we know this from later on. It is through Perez, through the second-born twin, that King David comes and Jesus. Through this situation, King David and Jesus. Kind of amazing, right? An amazing story through the tribe of Judah. It's an interesting story. There's a lot going on, and it's crazy, but it's got a good ending. Good ending. So, we're going to take a little break on Facebook, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at the larger story, and for those of you watching online, we'll come back. There's just no way to pause. So, I promise we'll be back.